All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this semester's first session of the Emerald Ash Borer University. My name is Bob Bruner. I am the Exotic Forest Specialist with Purdue University's Department of Entomology. Today, we are going to be hosting Dr. Phil Lewis. Dr. Lewis is a part of the USDA. He works in the Forest Pest Methods Laboratory, previously known as the Otis Laboratory, for those of you familiar with it. He has been there since 2002, working on quantifying pesticides in plant tissues and on the development of chemical and non-chemical control methods for invasive exotic insect pests, particularly those who are around trees such as Asian longhorn beetle, emerald ash borer, and more. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and let Dr. Lewis tell us about trapping for spotted lanternflies.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. I appreciate the invitation to give a talk for EAB University, and just welcome to everyone this morning. I wanted to talk about some results that we've gotten after many years of work trying to investigate a way to get the spotted lanternflies to lay eggs where we want them to, and the result of that is this trap that you see in the middle here that we call our lampshade trap. And we're using it for various tools and methods to look at populations of spotted lanternflies, as well as just determining what their population levels are and other things that we'll be investigating. But I did want to, before I get into how the trap was, how effective it is and how it was created, just give a brief overview of the spotted lanternfly itself. So for those of you who are very familiar with spotted lanternfly, I apologize for that, but I'll move through it quickly and then get to the main part of this trap and how it's being used. So spotted lanternfly is a very quite colorful insect. You can see a picture of the adult as it's laying eggs. You can see the abdomen swells up greatly, and the yellow fat bodies can be seen through the cuticle. And then when it flies, the hind wings can flare. You can see the red flares of the hind wings. And as far as the eggs themselves, they are laid starting now. About now, they'll start laying their eggs once they mature. The adults mature. And you can see sometimes you see these great clusters. Often they'll just be randomly placed on rocks and inanimate objects and other places within the forest environment and even in the urban environment as well. And these insects are sap feeders. So you can see here the younger stages. They kind of look like little raspberries. The younger stages are black and white. And then the fourth instar right before adults have this red form. And so they feed on the phloem, which is right below the bark on the sap of the tree. And since they're that type of feeding, then they have to expel all the extra water that is part of the tree's vascular system. And so once that happens, there's some amounts of sugar that get expelled as well, and you get sooty mold that the honeydew coats the leaves and the surfaces underneath the tree, and you get this sooty mold that's just in the environment anyway, and that can then grow on that, and you get these black areas and patches underneath these trees where the infestations are occurring. This is just a picture of the life cycle. This is just for a very brief time until the cuticle is hardened off once they're exposed to air. And then you can see these black and white forms, the white spots. There are three nymphal stages with that form. They progressively get bigger, just like grasshoppers. They have that molting form. And then you get the fourth instar right before the adult. They have this very bright, distinctive red form. And they're also very mobile and very good hoppers and leapers. And then the adults come out starting in August, depending on where you are in the country. And then they'll feed for 3-4 weeks and mature, and then start to lay their eggs. So this is their preferred host tree. It's called Tree of Heaven, Ailanthus altissima. It's very common. It's also an invasive weed or tree. It can grow quite tall, but you can often see it along roadsides in many parts of the country. It grows very rapidly and in poor conditions, so it's kind of suitable for these disturbed environments, especially along roads and railways. And you can see a close-up of the female. They have male and female trees. And you can see the seed pods there. that are formed by the female tree. So again, pictures of the different life stages. These are the egg mass that you can see here. They usually put a coating on it, and I'll show you pictures of that later, but this is after that coating is weathered off, and you can see the individual eggs that are lined up here. And since the tree of heaven, the preferred host tree, is often in these disturbed areas, like I mentioned, it's also been found to be transported, the insect, by trucks and rail and other forms of transportation. So that's really one of the reasons why it's becoming such a problem. Just some more pictures of the insect. You can see it can be quite striking. These are the eyes, and this is the antenna, this orange dot there. And you can see huge clusters of these insects, and the adults start to aggregate. And the younger stages can be on a bunch of different plants, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But the adults, once they become an adult, molt into that form, then they like to congregate on their preferred host tree, the tree of heaven. So you can see these large aggregations of this insect, and they start feeding heavily, and you see honeydew and sap from the tree, from the wounds that they're creating in the tree, start to flow down. And you can see these huge masses. Again, here's that sooty mole that I mentioned on this. So much honeydew is raining down. It covers all the grass right underneath the tree. And then the sooty mold grows on that, and then the plant can't photosynthesize, and you get these black patches, dead patches, basically, from this insect. And then also, this is just in somebody's backyard, and you can see the egg masses. Again, that coating, you can't see the individual egg masses here because the female put a coating on there, but you can see there are eggs all over. So you can imagine if this homeowner was moving and they're taking their play equipment, they're also transporting those eggs to the new location. This picture was taken by my technician, Emily Wallace, and there are situations where you get such heavy feeding that there's so much honeydew coming down the tree, you get this mat of just white goo that forms, and it doesn't smell nice either, but you can see that happening as well under these heavy infestations. This picture here on the right, it's actually a video. I just took a still shot because I found when I try to play the video on these webinars, it just can't keep up with it. It gets all choppy and distorted. But what you can see here, what I want to show is that this is a newer infestation. So you don't see all the black city mold, but these leaves are just totally wet. They're dripping. You can see the rivulets of honeydew and sap just flowing down this tree. There are bees and wasps flying around, kind of like when you have you go on a picnic and you have your Coke can open, you get the bees and the wasps flying around your Coke can. They're going after the sugars. Well, there's some sugars in here too, so they're flying around getting a meal as well. So it's just a big mess and a huge issue for people that are living in these areas where the infestations are heavy. So let me go back to where this all started. And it was first found back in 2014 in an area in Pennsylvania that's just north and west of Philadelphia. So the south east corner of the state of Pennsylvania, and it was found on their host tree. And you can see the blue star there where it was found. And this map was created 2 years after the initial find. So at that point, we were just in these 5 counties around the original infestation. Well, so a year later, after that season in 2017, you can see now the positive finds are in the red. The blue are surveys done, but there's no finds there. But you can see this is the Philadelphia metro area. This is New Jersey and the border there. And you can see now it's in 13 counties within the state of Pennsylvania. And at that point, not yet found in New Jersey. Well, 3 seasons later, just jump ahead to that, you can see the core area where it was originally found, these counties, and it's then 3 years after that, the previous slide, you can see it's now well into New Jersey, and also the western part of Pennsylvania. And then these goldenrod colors, you can see there are detections of the spotted lanternfly, but they didn't find it in the environment. So maybe through on someone's car, or packing material, or shipments that were made from the core area, people were finding the adult spotted lanternflies. So let me skip ahead here to the next year. Again, this is just one field season later. You can see it's continuing to kind of spread from that core area. Now we're into Connecticut and further into New Jersey and into Delaware, and then Virginia as well. And then this one spot, most likely because of rail in Ohio. And then the recent map, and I just checked it this morning, they have a new publication out dated September 1st, but it's really no different than the one right now. What's happening right now is the adults are just starting to mature and they're dispersing. And so I think in the next month or two, we're going to find a lot of new counties where there are infestations. But this is pretty much the current map of where the locations of the spotted lanternfly populations are. You can see it's in 14 states, and it's just continues to march on. So looking back at these egg masses, you can see here's a typical egg mass, and if it's a spotted lanternfly has emerged from one of these eggs within the egg mass, you can see a hole like this will be formed. And there's like a trap door, and they push it open, and it's this nice oval opening. If there's these round openings, then those are native parasitoids. So early on, we started looking at, well, maybe some native insects will feed and find these egg masses and parasitize them. That does happen, but it's pretty rare, and it's definitely not anything that's controlling the population, as you can see by the spread of it. Other people have looked at other natural predators, looking at birds, and different birds will feed on them. There's other insects that will feed on them, and vertebrates, squirrels, bats, frogs, and snakes will as well. And you can see here's one of the wheel bug, predatory insect that will feed on them. So yes, that does happen, but it's not in any way controlling these populations. So looking at the host list, one of the reasons why it's so hard to control is it's on a lot of different plants, everything from grapes to fruit trees, apple, and a lot of hardwood trees as well that they can feed and grow on. And then, as I mentioned, once they go to the adult form, they prefer the tree of heaven. And then we have other trees like black walnut, butternut, even hops, oriental bittersweet, oaks, tulip trees. So there's just a lot of different plants that they feed upon. Some non-chemical control approaches that have been tried, sticky bands. This is especially effective in the younger stages. You can see the young nymphs, they tend to crawl up, and then they can get stuck on these sticky bands, and those have been used. Other means is just scraping and trying to control the egg mass. As you can see, it's everything on fence post to this abandoned tire, and you can see the egg masses just everywhere. But you can go out, and have been people and kind of pushes to go out and scrape egg masses as much as possible to take that life stage out, because if you scrape off that egg mass, then it's not going to hatch, and you're not going to have as many insects the next year. Another means is trapping them. Again, taking advantage of their climbing behavior. They like to climb up trees, and so this is called a circle trap, and it just kind of routes them into this bag where they can get stuck and then die. Another method is chemical control, and this particular application is with a chemical called dinotefuran. And this class of insecticides is called a systemic. And so you can actually apply it either through the soil or through a bark spray that you can see is happening here. This is also used for emerald ash borer. This is actually emerald ash borer researcher, Therese Poland with the Forest Service, and she's putting on an application of this chemical for emerald ash borer control. And so this was tried for spotted lanternfly early on as well by the state of Pennsylvania. And you can see it has very quick impact on the insects. You can see the wing flaring, that's poisoning of the insects. And you can see the piles of dead insects on the ground as a result of the treatments. So I've looked at, and other people have looked at different chemical control methods. Adult lanternflies are susceptible to the dinotephuron and imidacloprid as well. The dinotephuron, when applied as a trunk injection, so you're actually injecting a specialized formulation of those chemicals through a small hole in the tree, and we saw a quick knockdown with that. Dinotephuron was one of the best ones and had the most rapid response by these insects. Even after a few hours, I had treated a tree, and you had dead insects just falling out of the tree onto the ground. Emamectin benzoate is maybe familiar with people who have worked with emerald ash borer, and that was applied as a trunk injection, and it did not work at all against spotted lanternfly, which was interesting. So also noted that there are individual trees that seem to be more attractive than others within the environment, and we're still trying to figure out what the reason for that is. For other traditional insecticides like bifenthrin or Tallstar, that can be applied as well as a cover spray, and it's effective for several weeks. As the insects come in contact with it, they'll be exposed, and it's enough to kill them. So one of the questions that I looked at was how long did these bark sprays last for spotted lanternfly? So we did a small study where we treated in late June and targeting the nymphs. And we had another set of trees where we looked at targeting just the adults, and we applied those treatments in late August. So real quick, just these are the weekly counts or so of the life stages, either nymphs, and around this time is when you get the adults, right about this time in early August. So this in gray is the early treatment group. So you can see over time, this is how many insects we found underneath those trees. And it's an average of 5 trees. These are the numbers from that. And then in green here, you can see the group of trees that was treated in late August that was targeting the adults. So yes, you can delay the treatment, but it looks like even by mid-June to early July, mid-July, you can put those applications out. And the benefit of that is it lasts the whole length of time. There's really no difference in later part of the season with the mortality between these two treatments. You can see the error bars. If they overlap, then there's no significant difference. But what I would recommend is that if you wait until August to treat, you're missing killing all these other life stages and making a bigger impact. So you might as well treat earlier. The treatment does last long enough for the field season. So that's my point there, that the late applications are not necessary. There's still plenty of chemical left in those trees from those earlier applications, and that will last well until when the adults are out and active. So looking now to our the topic of the talk and these lampshade traps that we have here, you can see a picture of them. Before I talk about that, there's another tool that has been used and I've been developing from my lab in treating the egg masses. So Bob mentioned that to me earlier before the talk started, that some of the staff in Indiana are scraping the egg masses, which is certainly effective. Another tool, if sometimes you have these large masses and maybe you don't want to spend all that time scraping that off, there is a product called Golden Pest Spray Oil. It's an organic product made of soybean oil, and when it's mixed as a 50-50 ratio with water, you can apply it as a spot treatment, and the mortality is quite high. This picture is actually from New Jersey, and this was a homeowner in New Jersey who found spotted lanternfly had hatched in her house from her Christmas tree that she had harvested in Pennsylvania. And then this is early many years ago, but it can be used as a treatment for egg masses. So getting into the main part of the talk of what I wanted to present today is how do we go about trapping these egg masses? And the purpose then is to encourage egg laying where we want them to, instead of this random We'd have to search out in the environment in these forested areas to kind of hunt and find the egg masses. It's not always hard to do that, but sometimes it'd just be more convenient if we could draw them into where we want to. So many reasons for that: population detection. We could do assessments of how heavily infested an area is. And then we can also trap and remove versus scraping them randomly within the environment. These traps that we've developed can actually concentrate the egg masses within them and then can be destroyed. So some of the inspiration and early attempts came from our noticing that the eggs would be pretty much random within the environment in the woods, but sometimes they would cluster them like you see here. And so we set out a bunch of burlap and different situations where we thought, well, maybe they'll crawl under them and lay eggs. And sure enough, we at times we would find that they would lay eggs underneath this burlap in large quantities. Here was one where we had a horizontal tree that had been felled, or a dead tree, and then we just laid this burlap over it, and then we lifted it up, and sure enough, they would go underneath that kind of protected area and lay their eggs. We found this rusty metal lid from a 55-gallon drum and found it out in the woods where we were setting up our studies. We turned it around, and on the back side of it, they had laid a bunch of their eggs. And it's another situation where people have noted that they like, or will like, and will lay their eggs on rusty metal. So we started about 5 years ago. We started a bunch of different tests, and we tested this rusty metal. We got some thin sheet metal. We sandblasted it, and you can chemically treat it. There's a recipe on the internet, of course, and you can get rusty metal and create that rusty metal environment yourself. And so we tried all these kind of pleated and covered and these kind of sandwich situations where they could crawl in there. And we tried metal, again, rusty metal, and then we would cover it with a burlap to try to get that situation again where, but again, where we want them to lay eggs where we can harvest them from. So all these different configurations that we tried, starting in 2018. Over 500 traps that we tried over those years, but we didn't get a lot of eggs being laid consistently. But we did note a couple of key things that would be happening is that it was not always totally random where they would lay their eggs. They had a preference for underside of limbs and these dry protected areas. But we couldn't get, with all the different traps and configurations we had, we didn't get any kind of statistical significance until we set out a series of traps in 2021. And in that case, you can see here the ones that we set out, we focused on this covered and uncovered situation. And then we had these three different materials: roofing tile, this is gaffing tape, which has a nice texture to it, and then cork. And we tried this layered and unlayered situation where we thought, well, maybe they go underneath, the tiles and lay their eggs under there. So we're trying all these different things. So this is the first time that we got significance between our treatments. So again, you can see on the tree, this is how it would be configured. We'd pair up a covered and an uncovered, and then had the trapping surface inside these little prisms. And we tried different heights. So from this, we got significance. Like I said, we found that they do like this roofing material. They prefer it. They're not avoiding it like some of the others. And it was preferable over cork, which would warp and break down, and it wasn't just a good durable surface. It didn't matter whether we had the trap at the base of the tree or this term is DBH, that's the diameter. It's a forestry term of where they measure the tree. So it's the diameter at breast height. So we can have the trap set at a convenient height where we're working, basically. And they do prefer this covered environment. The downside to our study in 2021 is that we got significance, but it was very, very low. We only got, say, 3 to 5 egg masses per trap. Well, we could just spend our time searching for egg masses. It's not that at that level, that amount, it's not going to be an effective trap to use. So in 2022, last winter, we started setting out or this time of year last year, we started setting out kind of our one last ditch effort of combining all these different things, but decided to put the trap right on the tree instead of off to the side. And so we picked the roofing material. It comes in this roll that you can buy. They call it a starter roll. So typically, if in the construction industry, they're putting this right above or right at the edge of the roof, right above the gutters. They'll lay this down first, and then they'll lay the normal tile that you think of that you see on your roof. So this is called a starter strip. Comes in this nice, convenient 35-foot roll, and easy, easy to maneuver and manipulate and take on and off a tree. So what we did was you use a staple gun and some zip ties at the bottom, and then we have this batting material that we use at the top, because we found that the insects, if we didn't secure it at the top here, they like to crawl up, and if we had a tight point here, they would just kind of cram themselves in and get stuck and die and not really lay their eggs. So this kind of is a blocker, basically. So you can see that the asphalt portion of the material is put attached to the tree. So the asphalt material is pointing out. And then we take a second layer, and you can see this white part. That's just the sticky backing. We leave the sticky backing, the plastic on there, and we invert it so that there's an environment in there. And that's, you can see the shape. So that's why we call it a lampshade trap. We try to affix the tree and construct it such that there's a little gap here so that the insects will be crawling up, and they'll just crawl in there. Nice protected environment, sheltered, about a 2-inch gap all the way around. And you can see this, we had different scenarios. We tried horizontally oriented trees versus the normal vertical orientation, just to see if there would be a difference. And then we picked different sizes of trees. So you can see this one is a little bit bigger, and just a normal tree that we would find, say, in the 3 to 5-inch diameter range. So we had 6 study sites. We set out a little bit over 100 traps, and we deployed those right around this time last year, and then through late October in these areas. So early on, we started to see, and here's this batting material. This is looking up inside the trap. Again, you have asphalt shingle material on both surfaces as they crawl up. So this is the tree, and this is the lampshade part. And you can see the batting material here, so that keeps them from getting stuck and killing themselves. So they'll go in, and sure enough, here's another egg mass here. And we caught them in the act. They were laying their egg mass there. And we went by a few weeks later. You can see these gravid females. They would crawl in, and they would crawl out and up, and they would lay their eggs in here. And so we were pretty excited, and we started to take them apart and evaluate these in January and February of this year. So these were the results. We found that they definitely preferred the normally oriented, the live trees, the vertical trees. Even though the same trap was on the horizontal tree, and we would see them crawling on horizontal trees, they did not lay their egg masses in them, or very, very little. And you can see at some sites we had over 50, average of 50 or over 50 egg masses per trap. On average, we had a couple trees, traps where we caught over 100 egg masses. And then we looked at size classes. So these were the smallest trees, the 4 to 5-inch tree. And we found that it didn't really matter. The most convenient as far as amount of material that you're going to use, you don't need to put it on. You can put it on larger trees, but it gets a little cumbersome. We can, in fact, just focus our efforts on a nice medium size class, 6 to 8-inch diameter tree, easy to handle. You're not using too much material, and you're getting just as much production or just as many egg masses per square foot. And this is actually a calculation of the square foot of the trapping area. So there's no statistical difference, but it trends to you're getting a little bit more bang for your buck by using these middle class, size class trees, 6 to 8-inch in diameter. So this is the harvesting time in the winter. You can see just the masses oftentimes that we would see hundreds and hundreds of egg masses. And again, we would use this for research. We could cut this out of the roofing material and send that back to our lab where we could do tests, or we could just simply scrape all these off or put them all in a plastic bag and throw them in a dumpster and remove them from the environment. One of the interesting things when we compared the amount of eggs laid within those traps and outside, it was sometimes 300 times more. So they greatly concentrate their egg masses inside the traps. They prefer to lay their eggs in them. It's low cost for that size tree, the 6 to 8 inch middle size tree. It's just several dollars for the materials. It takes a few minutes to construct it on a tree. And it can be set out early, can be set out in July if you wanted to, and just left up until the hard frost is when the adults get killed with the hard frost. And you can just leave the traps up there until you're ready to monitor them. Like I mentioned in my summary, we had several of the sites, we had over 50 egg masses per trap. And this is, again, we expect those numbers for medium to high infestations is where we were putting these traps out. And we feel that if we had gotten started earlier last year, we would have gotten even higher. Some of these traps were not put out until mid-October, late October. So just to summarize that and wrap it up, uses for the lampshade traps, we have research needs, so we can, again, use this for, we're looking at biological control organisms that will attack the egg stage, and so we're looking at those, so we need those to rear insects with. So there's research needs. This also could be used by states and other interested parties if you want to see if your location is infested. Maybe it hasn't been found yet, but this could certainly be put out in the environment and used as a way to detect the lanternfly infestation early on. It can also be used as a trap and remove, or to delimit, or find out the extent of where the population is of lanternflies. And also we're looking at using this if we set out so many within a wooded environment where we're concerned about, we can get an estimation of how heavy is the infestation in this area and compare between heavily infested and lightly infested. So that's some of the research that's happening now that we've found an effective trap for these insects. Some of the key personnel could not have done it without my technicians that helped me, Amanda Davila Flores here, Emily Wallace and Melissa are my two main technicians out in Pennsylvania that help set up all the tests and things. And Bob said once we finish this and they publish it, he's going to send an email out, and these resources will be sent to you as well. A link to YouTube, how to construct it. There's a 2-page with sources of the materials, PDF that can be found, and then also the research paper that was published earlier this year. So I think that about wraps it up for me, and I think we can take any questions that people have.
Okay, so we've only gotten one question so far. It comes from a little bit earlier in the presentation. Someone is asking if the different sprays and other pesticides used to control spotted lanternfly, will they kill native insects? Like, what kind of impact would they have on them?
Sure, yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, some of the generalized sprays, yes, they're just general insecticides. There's not any targeted insecticide that just impacts spotted lanternfly. So if you're putting out the cover spray, that bifenthrin product or Tallstar, that is a general insecticide and does have impact on a wide variety of beneficial insects as well as other insects. You can target the applications to just where the lanternflies are. The tree of heaven, where they prefer to feed on, especially as at the adult stage. There's not a lot of, since that's an invasive plant as well, there's not a lot of invasive or native insects that feed on that or use it as a resource. So you're having less impact by directing those treatments onto specific areas where other insects aren't really present.
So do we have any other questions that people would like to ask? We do have plenty of time left over. All right, well, I am not seeing anything pop up in the chat right now. So I'd say, Dr. Lewis, you did your job very well. You answered everyone's questions. So that was a great talk you gave there. And it's very, very interesting. Like he
Great.
said,
Yeah, happy to present some of the work that's been going on at my laboratory here.
yeah, I was very interested in it. I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes. And like you said, the links that you see there, I will send out and I will hopefully get posted to this video when it's put up on YouTube. Those of you watching YouTube right now, you should be able to find them in the comments or the description of the video. And with that, I think that is good enough for today. Thank you very much, Dr. Lewis.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you all for listening. Appreciate it.